Hi everybody. This week we're talking about universal design and universal design for learning, which is the educational movement that's come out of universal design. Universal design for learning is kind of the wrap-up of all of the things we've been looking at. It talks about ways to design instruction for not just those who are disabled in some way, but those are from different cultures, have different languages, may not have access to the resources that more well-off kids have, all kinds of different students. And I wanted to start with a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. Obviously, she didn't say this about universal design, which started quite a number of years after she died, but it seemed somehow appropriate. And she said, "Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any map of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm, or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity, without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere." And I liked that quote because universal design is about making sure that everyone has access to that neighborhood, that everyone can go to a school and can attend college if they are desirous of doing so and are prepared to do so, that people have a chance to get jobs at the factory, on the farm, or in the office, no matter what their abilities or inabilities. Universal design is the brainchild of Dr. Ron Mace. He defined it as follows: universal design is the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptations or specialized design. And that's the uniqueness of the idea of universal design. It's not that you design, for example, sidewalks for the normal person, and then you retrofit them in some esoteric way for people who are in wheelchairs. Rather, it's that you make it so that all sidewalks have curb cuts, so that people with wheelchairs, but also people who are wheeling baby carts or moving bicycles or shoving things around on wheels and dollies, can all get from the sidewalk across the road and back up onto the other side of the sidewalk. Dr. Mace was born in 1941 at the age of 9. He had a rather severe case of polio, which left him seriously disabled. His legs would no longer support him, and one of his arms didn't work very well either. His parents were told to institutionalize him, but to their credit, they decided not to and encouraged him and helped him always to lead a full, regular life. Ron Mace was always, even before he had polio, from the age of 5, a tinkerer, a builder. And as a child, he built many of the specially adapted things that helped him function, including in this picture you see here of him as a child, the arm brace that held his arm up so that he could use the paralyzed arm to do, it wasn't completely paralyzed, but the arm that he had no strength in, to do a number of things on the tray table that he also designed. He applied to North Carolina State University to get a bachelor's in architecture from their School of Design and was almost not admitted. The dean told him that there was no way he could possibly complete the course. And however, he did so. His parents practically gave up their whole existence for about 6 years. His mother lived with him in a small mobile home on campus because the dorms were not accessible. He attended school at a time when nothing was accessible. There were no handicap laws, there were no disability centers, there was nothing. And in many cases, his parents literally had to carry him to classes where he had no other access. However, he did graduate with a degree, Bachelor's of Architecture, in 1966, I'm sorry, and went on to practice architecture and become the originator of universal design, and many of the architectural features that we see in buildings today worked with various presidents on the American for Disabilities Act, the earlier acts that preceded it, and ironically went on to become a professor at North Carolina State University in their School of Design, and started the Center for Universal Design at North Carolina State, where it still is. North Carolina State is now a leader in the concept of universal design. And one of the things you'll be reading, a short piece that you'll be reading for this week, is a transcript of the last speech that Ron Mace gave in 1998, just before he died rather suddenly at the age of 58, in which he answers some questions about universal design and kind of lets you into his thoughts about why he always felt that it was so helpful and necessary. So I think you'll enjoy that. Taking the concept of universal design appears everywhere in our everyday lives now, in a lot of things that we take for granted. And when I started reading about it, that I hadn't realized were actually originally designed for people with disabilities. Now, perhaps the most common thing that we think of and see all the time are the dropped curbs or the cut curbs that allow people in wheelchairs to go along the sidewalk and then go across the street and go back up to the other sidewalk. But of course, these dropped curves are also very useful to bicyclists, to mothers wheeling children, to people dragging things, to people who just simply aren't very steady on their feet and find it difficult to step up and down curbs. So they're a really good example of the idea of universal design, that when you design something to make it more usable for one group of people, you often, and often intentionally, are able to increase its usefulness to lots and lots of people. Another very common thing we see all the time are wheelchair ramps next to stairs. This is one of my very favorite pictures of wheelchair ramps. The architect who did this was absolutely brilliant, because it also carries one of the important ideas of universal design, and that is that when you design something to make it more usable for a particular group of people, the design itself should be beautiful. Form should follow function. It shouldn't be clunky. It shouldn't be makeshift. And I think this wheelchair ramp is a brilliant example of that. Another form of universal design that we're pretty familiar with is closed captioning on TV. Originally, of course, designed for those who are deaf or hard of hearing. However, think how useful it is now to so many people. People who are learning languages, people who are in noisy environments. Think about sitting at the airport and watching the news on closed captioning, which you do all the time, or the sports bar, because the noise level is just so high. So again, another example of a design feature meant to help one particular group of people that has universal application. Another one I never even thought of as universal design is the ubiquitous wheeled suitcase. Originally designed, of course, for people who could not lift suitcases, older people, disabled people. Now, of course, everybody in the airport uses them. But I bet you didn't think about the fact that Velcro sneakers were originally designed for people who could not tie their shoes. Older people, people with arthritis in their hands, people without the manual dexterity to tie shoes. And now, of course, they're the latest thing. There's a set of 3 Nikes with Velcro closures. And what about these 3 things? All 3 of these were designed for people, again, who lacked manual dexterity or strength in their hands. We have the levered doorknob, the ridged grips that we find on so many tools now that help us grasp them, and the slap or large electric switch, again for people who would have difficulty closing their fingers around an electric switch and manipulating it. This switch you can just hit on the top or hit on the bottom and you turn your lights on and off. All 3 of these specially designed to help people with problems with their hands. All 3 of them things we see everywhere now because they're just useful to all of us. But what about the humble, flexible straw? I never had considered that as an example of universal design. It was, however, originally designed for hospital patients who were bedridden and therefore had difficulty drinking out of glasses without spilling them. Instead of having to design special glasses and wash them and everything, somebody designed a flexible straw, now beloved of children and mothers with juice boxes and all kinds of people. And of course, what about those universal signs? Again, originally designed for those who were unable to read or people who did not speak the language. Now they tell all of us where the bathroom is and where the first aid kit is and where we're not supposed to smoke, no matter what country we're in. So these are just some examples of where you see the principles of universal design playing out in everyday life. Now let's move toward universal design for learning. Probably the best known person in the field, Dr. David Rose, pictured here. He is a Harvard professor, co-founder with 4 other people of the Center for Applied Special Technology, CAST, which is arguably the biggest nonprofit in universal design for learning. He and 4 other folks from the North Shore Children's Hospital in Salem, Massachusetts, were sitting in a pizza parlor one day and came up with the idea for CAST, and it has grown ever since. You will be watching, the main thing you'll be watching for this whole week is a 45-minute video by Dr. Rose. He is a neuropsychologist at Harvard, and I think it's a long video, so don't watch it until you have time to sit down and watch for 45 minutes. But it's exciting, it's clear. He takes you from the very beginnings of universal design and universal design for learning all the way up through some of the amazing neuropsychology things and evidences that show what good teachers have known for a very long time, and that is, it's not just about a whole lot of kids who learn the same way and then a few kids who we call learning disabled or ADHD or something who learn differently, but rather every one of us learns and reads and thinks and produces and writes uniquely. And so universal design for learning is, again, not just about, well, what do we have to do to help the disabled people, although it often starts there. It's a way of designing learning so that it is accessible and exciting and useful and productive for all different kinds of people. And of course, the groups that we've been talking about, those who do not have access to resources, those who do not speak the same language as the majority of the school, those who come from other cultures, all kinds of people. Universal Design for Learning has 3 basic principles which sound very simple on the front, but when you start pushing the boundaries of them, you realize that it takes you into all kinds of exciting and unusual territory in instruction. And I just think it's I don't know, I'm preparing for this week. I've gotten really excited about these concepts, you can tell. 3 principles. Provide multiple means of representation. Don't just hand a kid a textbook. Have video, have pictures, have verbal, both recorded and oral. Have all different ways of representing the knowledge that you want the child to learn. Secondly, provide multiple means of action and expression. In order to learn things, children have to be able to act upon them, and they have to be able to show you that they have learned. And again, if there's only one way to show learning, multiple choice test, fill in the little dot, then all kinds of kids are not going to be able to demonstrate their learning as well as they could. Finally, provide multiple means of engagement, which means that basically children, in order to learn things, anyone in order to learn things, has to manipulate it, use it, apply it. And again, there has to be more than one way to do this. And one of the best ways, of course, to do that is to allow children to suggest some of the ways to do these things. Children may wish to act out their things. They may wish to do service projects. They may wish to produce art. There's just a million different ways to think about these things.